If someone had told me that moving to an upscale neighborhood would turn me into a dad version of John Wick, I would have laughed. But that was before a group posing as an HOA decided to kidnap my daughter. Their biggest mistake? They didn't come after just any father. They came after a Marine-trained hunter who spent 8 years tracking high-value targets in some of the harshest environments on Earth. Where are you watching from right now? Drop a comment below. This story is spreading faster than a viral video. I'm Jake Sullivan, and this is how I went from suburban dad to full-blown vigilante in just 37 hours. It began the day Emma and I arrived at our new home in Willow Creek. Estates. The place looked picture-perfect. Lawns trimmed to military precision, homes that mimicked old wealth despite being barely a decade old, and neighbors who seemed to measure your worth by the shine on your car. I chose this neighborhood for Emma after her mother passed away 2 years ago, thinking a quiet, secure community would give us both a fresh start. I couldn't have been more wrong. The first warning sign came at the HOA orientation. Michelle, Hartford, the self-declared HOA president, welcomed us with a smile that felt more like a threat. Mid-40s, dressed in a designer blazer that probably cost more than my mortgage, she had a way of making small talk feel like an interrogation. "So, Mr. Sullivan," she said, flipping through her clipboard, "a single father must be tough. Managing everything on your own. What exactly do you do for work?" I told her I was a security consultant, leaving out the special ops detail. Her eyes lit up like she'd just hit the jackpot. Throughout the meeting, she kept circling back to our finances and long-term plans for the house. It wasn't curiosity, it was probing. And after years in special operations, you learn to recognize when something's off. Michelle was practically glowing with red flags. Emma must have picked up on the tension too. She kept tugging at my sleeve during the meeting, her 8-year-old instincts sharper than most adults I've met. Afterward, as we walked back towards our house, our neighbor, Carol Bennett, called out. She looked like someone who'd seen better days. Former teacher, early 50s, with kind but anxious eyes. "Mr. Sullivan," she said, casting a quick glance up and down the street. "Welcome to the neighborhood. If you need anything at all." She handed me a casserole dish and leaned in close. "Just be careful. Things aren't always what they seem here." Before I could ask what she meant, she turned and hurried back into her house. That first week passed without incident, but the unease didn't go away. I kept noticing small things, a little too subtle to be obvious, but too consistent to ignore. The HOA fees were unusually high. There were more empty houses on our street than seemed normal for such a high-end community. And certain neighbors had a strange habit of turning away the moment I looked in their direction, like they'd been caught snooping. Then Emma found something in the mailbox that sent everything into overdrive. A crumpled slip of paper with just 5 words, "Leave while you still can." But it wasn't the message that made my blood run cold. It was the small bird symbol drawn in the corner with 2 letters underneath, WDD. To anyone else, it meant nothing. To me, it was personal. WDD stood for Watchdog Division Delta, the code name for my old Special Ops unit. Someone knew who I was, and they were letting me know they were watching. That night, after Emma was asleep, I did what I was trained to do. I hunted, not with weapons, but with data. I dug through public property records for Willow Creek over the past year, and what I found chilled me. 5 homes had changed hands in just 6 months, all sold way below market value, and the pattern was unmistakable. Every seller was either elderly, a single parent, or someone recently widowed. People easily pressured, vulnerable. The next morning, I visited Mrs. Thompson, a sweet older woman whose freshly posted "For Sale" sign was hard to miss. Her hands trembled as she opened the door. "Mrs. Thompson," I said in a calm voice, "I'm Jake Sullivan, just moved in down the street. Mind if I ask you a few things about the neighborhood?" She hesitated, looked over my shoulder as if afraid someone might be watching, then quickly ushered me inside. Over the next hour, she confirmed what I feared. Something was very wrong in Willow Creek Estates. The HOA wasn't just strict, it was predatory. They weaponized fake violations, bogus fines, and outright intimidation to force residents into selling their homes at cut-rate prices. Then they flipped the properties to developers or wealthy buyers, pocketing huge profits. "It started with little things," Mrs. Thompson whispered, her teacup trembling against the saucer. "My grass was a quarter-inch too long. My mailbox wasn't the approved shade of white. Then the fines kept coming, thousands of dollars. When I couldn't pay, they offered to buy my house for half of what it's worth." Her voice cracked. "My husband built this place with his own hands 40 years ago. But what can I do? They're bleeding me dry. Last week they said my garden gnome was aesthetically offensive and fined me $500. I memorized every word. My tactical instincts kicked in. This wasn't random harassment. It was a deliberate operation, a strategy. Someone was running it like a military campaign, identifying soft targets, applying pressure, and moving in once resistance crumbled. The real question was how deep this went, and who was pulling the strings. That afternoon, Michelle called an emergency HOA meeting. At the community center podium, she announced a list of new regulations that were downright absurd. Lawns trimmed no higher than 2 inches, no outdoor furniture visible from the street, curtains restricted to white or beige, and a new monthly security assessment fee of $500. I raised my hand to protest, but Michelle cut me off with that same cold smile. "Mr. Sullivan," she said, her voice sweet but sharp, "as a new resident, perhaps you should take some time to observe how we do things here before offering criticism." The threat was obvious. Around me, neighbors shifted uncomfortably, but no one else dared to speak. Fear had silenced them all. Later in the parking lot, a man in his 60s approached me. He introduced himself as George Kim, a retired engineer. "Son," he said in a low voice, "I've been battling these vultures for 2 years, lost my wife to cancer, and they started circling the very next day. Be careful. They play dirty, and they've got connections." That night, I took no chances. I installed hidden cameras around the house, old habits from my military days. I also started teaching Emma basic safety skills, disguising the lessons as games. While we played in the yard, I asked, "If someone you don't know tells you to go with him, what do you do?" She smiled and shouted, "Run, yell, tell." "Smart girl," I said, forcing a smile. She had no idea how soon those words might save her life. I converted my home office into a full-blown monitoring station, multiple screens, live feeds from every angle of our property. As I reviewed footage and ran diagnostics, my mind kept circling back to the watchdog symbol on that note. Someone from my past had sent a message. But who? And why now? The last time I saw that symbol was in Afghanistan, where our unit specialized in tracking and neutralizing high-value targets across hostile terrain. Was this the work of someone using those same tactics, or someone who knew them too well? Either way, I couldn't afford to wait and find out. I had to be ready. 2 days later, my cameras caught something I wasn't prepared for. At 2 a.m., Tony Marino, Michelle's right-hand thug, and a guy built like a demolition vehicle, was sneaking around my yard. He wasn't just lurking, he was taking pictures. When I zoomed in on the footage, my chest tightened. He was photographing Emma's bedroom window. In his hand was a thick folder with a label that made my blood run cold. Target assessment. This wasn't just about crooked property deals anymore. They were collecting intel on my daughter, and I knew exactly what that meant. This was classic pressure point profiling. Isolate what someone values most and use it to manipulate or break them. But they'd made a mistake. They moved too soon, and now I knew exactly what game they were playing. And, more importantly, I knew how to play back. The next morning, Emma came home from school excited about a new kids' HOA club Michelle had announced. "All the neighborhood kids have to join, Daddy," she said. "She's super nice. She gave us cookies." Every alarm in my head went off at once. Michelle was moving in, targeting kids under the guise of community fun. I smiled and told Emma she could go, with supervision. That Saturday, I dropped her off at the community center for the so-called club meeting, then circled back to observe from my car. Through the window, I watched Michelle and two other women seated at a small table with the kids, but they weren't asking about favorite colors or weekend plans. They were asking about parents' work schedules, which homes were left empty during the day, and if anyone had spare keys hidden outside. They were using the kids to gather tactical intelligence. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Emma. "Dad, Mrs. H talking about something called Willow Plan. Said not to tell parents. Scared." I was out of the car instantly, ready to storm the building, but I stopped myself. If I acted now, I'd expose Emma as the leak. Michelle didn't know my daughter had just blown her cover, so I waited, jaw clenched, every muscle on edge. 15 agonizing minutes later, the meeting ended. Emma came running to the car, trying to look normal, but her hands trembled as she buckled in. As we drove, she told me everything. Mrs. Hartford said we're special helpers for a secret project. She wants to know when our parents work late or go on trips. She said if we told anyone, our families might have to move away forever. Emma was trying to be brave, but I could see the fear in her eyes. That was it. This wasn't just harassment. It wasn't extortion. This was organized crime, masquerading as a neighborhood association. And they had just threatened my daughter. Pulled the car over and wrapped Emma in a hug so tight I could feel her heart pounding against mine. "You did exactly right, sweetheart," I whispered. "You were so brave to tell me. Nobody should ever ask you to keep secrets from Daddy." "Okay?" She nodded, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. "I didn't like it, Dad," she said quietly. She tried to make it sound fun, like we were spies, but it felt wrong. I stroked her hair, steadying my voice. "That's because you've got good instincts, Em, and you should always trust that feeling." I forced a smile. "Now, how about we grab some ice cream, and you can tell me everything else you remember?" Over chocolate sundaes at the old diner we used to visit with her mom, Emma started opening up. There were papers on the table, Dad, like folders with pictures of people's houses and families. I saw one with our house on it, and your picture. It had red writing that said, "Priority target military background." She looked down, stirring the melting ice cream around in slow circles. Mrs. Hartford got all excited when she saw I noticed. She said, "You used to be a soldier, and that made our family extra special for their project." I kept my face calm, nodding gently, but inside my pulse was spiking. Not only did they know I had a military past, they knew specifics. That red label confirmed it. Someone had done their homework, and not just a surface-level Google search. This was compiled intelligence, probably pulled from somewhere it never should have been accessed. The question was, how deep did their files go? Did they know my MOS, my operational deployments, or the identities of people I'd worked with? If they had that level of intel, this wasn't just a local scam. It was something far more dangerous. That night, just after I got Emma to bed, there was a knock on my front door. I checked the camera feed first, old habits. It was Carol Bennett, our neighbor. Her face was pale, and her eyes looked raw, like she'd been crying for hours. "Jake," she said, using my first name for the first time since we'd moved. "In." I can't take it anymore. I let her inside, made her tea, and sat across from her at the kitchen table while she poured her story out. "They destroyed my husband," she said, voice trembling. "He tried to fight them. 2 years. Ago, after they fined us for having the wrong shade of beige shutters, he started digging into their finances, their connections. He was a lawyer and he found things they didn't want found." She clutched her mug like it was anchoring her to the moment. "He traced fake fines, fake inspections, forged city documents. Then our car got vandalized. Our dog was poisoned. His clients started canceling without reason. Within 6 months, his practice was in ruins, and then he broke. Nervous collapse. He hasn't been the same since. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder that had clearly been opened and closed hundreds of times. It was thick, worn at the edges, full of notes, clippings, bank statements, and photos. He kept records, she said. Even when they were closing in, these are everything he found before they silenced him. I flipped through the contents carefully. There were flagged bank transfers tied to shell companies, real estate documents with forged signatures, and even photos of Michelle Hartford meeting in back alleys with people who had criminal records a mile long. My eyes paused on one image. Michelle, shaking hands with a man I recognized. A name I hadn't heard since my last mission overseas. This wasn't a rogue HOA. This was a front, a cover operation. And the rot went all the way up. I sat in the car with the engine off, eyes locked on the community center doors, watching, waiting. Every protective instinct screamed at me to storm the place, but I forced myself to hold position. This wasn't a rescue mission yet. This was reconnaissance. I needed hard proof, and this was the closest we'd gotten to a live opportunity. Still, the silence in that car was deafening, every minute stretching like a wire pulled tight, waiting to snap. 15 minutes passed, then 30. I kept eyes on the tracker. Emma's signal steady inside the building. I had camera drones circling at a distance, just close enough to capture audio through directional mics, but not close enough to be seen. And then it came through. Michelle's voice, clear as day. The Willow Plan isn't just about homes. It's about control. Communities fall when people are allowed to act freely. What we're building here is a model, one that can be replicated town by town, street by street, and it starts with the next generation, you. My knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. A second voice chimed in, male, older, one I didn't recognize. When we know everything about their parents, we can shape behavior, predict resistance, remove obstacles early. That was it. Confirmation of psychological profiling, target conditioning, using children as data sources, and possibly more. Emma's tracker flashed, heel press, once, twice, 3 times. She was signaling me. I was out of the car before I even knew I'd moved. Approached. From the side entrance, bypassed the main doors. Old instincts took over, move silent, move fast, stay in the blind spots. I entered through a service hallway and got eyes on the room through a crack in the storage door. The kids sat in a semicircle, looking confused. Emma was trying to smile, but I could see the stiffness in her posture. Michelle stood in front, clipboard in hand. But what made my blood go cold was the man beside her, tall, bald, with a military build that was too familiar. Not just military, contractor, black ops type. I'd seen his face once before, in a surveillance briefing years ago. Alec Varnett, former PsyOps, dishonorably discharged, went dark, rumored to run private influence operations for hire, and now he was here. In Willow Creek, the pieces clicked into place like a loaded chamber. This wasn't just about money. It was about influence, control, a private behavioral experiment disguised as suburban order, testing manipulation at the micro level before deploying it broader. I hit record, captured everything, their words, their faces, their charts. Then I slipped back out the way I came and was back in my car by the time the kids were dismissed. Emma climbed in and I pulled her into a hug. You did so good, Em. So good. She looked up. Were they bad people, Daddy? I didn't sugarcoat it. Yes, baby. But now we've got what we need to stop them. Because now I had names, I had audio, I had a trail, and I wasn't alone anymore. Officer Rodriguez, the state police contact, Carol's records, my training, we had just moved from defense to offense. But I had to trust the plan, trust the training, trust Emma. For the trap to work, the predator had to play prey. Just long enough. 2 hours later, my tracker pinged. Emma's signal was on the move, away from the community center. They were relocating her. I followed at a safe distance, heart pounding, but mind razor sharp. This was my arena, hunt, track, retrieve. the e-house. Signal stopped at an abandoned warehouse on the edge of town. I parked a block away and approached on foot. Senses dialed to max. Through a dirt-smeared window, I spotted Emma, scared but unharmed, seated in a chair. Michelle was there, flanked by Tony and two men I didn't recognize. All of them were on phones, clearly negotiating something. Then my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Want your daughter back safe? 24 hours to sign your house over. 50% market value. No police or things get messy. They'd played their hand. Now, it was my move. The mistake they made? Thinking I was just another frightened suburban dad. What they didn't know was that they'd just activated a Marine with a war record in mountain ranges, deserts, and cities crawling with insurgents. Emma wasn't a hostage. She was a mission. And I don't fail missions. I tapped my voice recorder and called the number. Michelle answered, her voice laced with faux sympathy. Mr. Sullivan, so glad you called. As you can see, Emma's perfectly safe. Such a sweet girl. It would be a shame if, well, you know. I made my voice shake, let the fear show. Please, don't hurt her. I'll do whatever you want. Smart man, she cooed. Come to the warehouse, alone. Bring the house deed. No police, no games, or little Emma learns what happens when families break HOA rules. While keeping her talking, I texted Rodriguez our location, fingers flying in silent, practiced motion. Years of covert ops taught me how to speak one language with my mouth and another with my hands. His reply came seconds later, backup ready. Need confession for green light. Perfect. Now all I needed was for Michelle to keep talking. Michelle, I said, my voice cracking, why are you doing this? We just wanted a decent place to live. She laughed, actually laughed. Oh, Jake, this is bigger than you think. Willow Creek is a gold mine. We've cleared $15 million in property flips this year alone. Sometimes you have to break a few eggs or families to make an omelet. Your military pension and that nice insurance payout from your wife's death make you an appealing target. And that corner lot of yours? Perfect spot for the mini mall. My investors want? My grip tightened on the phone, fury rising with her casual mention of my wife. So it's all about money, I said. You're destroying lives for profit. She didn't miss a beat. Welcome to America, soldier. Boy, the HOA's just a front. We've got this running in 5 states. Politicians, cops, judges, they all get a cut. No one blinks over a few displaced families when there's millions at stake. She paused, and I could hear the smirk in her voice. But you're different. Most people fold when we push. You made us work for it. I almost respect that. Almost. I kept her talking, dragging out details as my tactical instincts ran through the warehouse layout from memory. 2 exits, 1 loading dock, high windows that could offer entry. There were probably cameras, but likely old ones, given the building's worn state. How many others have you done this to? I asked, pretending to give in. 43 properties across 5 developments, she said proudly. Willow Creek's our crown jewel. Land values are soaring. In 5 years, it'll be a commercial gold mine. We'll be billionaires. Her voice turned darker. That sweet teacher next door, Carol? Her husband tried to expose us. Poor man had a complete breakdown. Amazing what a few anonymous threats and well-placed harassment can do to someone's mind. And once they're labeled unstable, no one listens to their rants about corrupt HOAs. My blood ran cold. They'd crushed Carol's husband. Then used his breakdown to silence him. These weren't just criminals. They were experts in psychological warfare. I'll bring the deed, I said, Abe, but I want proof Emma's okay. Through the window, I saw Michelle walk over to my daughter and hand her a phone. Daddy, Emma's voice came, small but steady. I'm okay. They're mean, but I remembered what you taught me. I'm being brave, like you said. My heart swelled with pride, even as fury burned deeper. That's my girl, I said. Remember our song, the one Mama used to sing? It was our code. If she sang it straight, she was safe. If she changed the words, she was in danger. Her voice came clear and strong. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. Original lyrics. She was scared but unharmed. That was enough. I spent the next hour making calls, cashing in old favors from military contacts. Rodriguez was already coordinating with state police to keep local corruption out of the loop. I even reached out to an old friend in the FBI's Public Corruption Unit, someone high enough up the ladder to be clean. But the real breakthrough came from an unlikely source. Linda Xiao, Michelle's own accountant, had been slipping encrypted messages into my mailbox. Turns out she'd been trying to escape the operation for months, collecting evidence the entire time. She'd noticed my military bearing and figured I might be her ticket to witness protection. We arranged a brief meeting where she handed me USB drives packed with 7 years of financial records, recorded conversations, and even video footage of Michelle meeting with known organized crime figures. Michelle wasn't just exploiting. Willow Creek, she was planning to expand nationwide. Linda called it the HOA revolution, a scheme to turn homeowner associations into profit engines using systematic intimidation. She had a full playbook detailing how to manipulate regulations, scare homeowners, and funnel profits into shell companies. This was far bigger than a local scam. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I approached the warehouse, holding what looked like a deed. Tony met me at the entrance, giving me a rough pat-down. "No wire, no weapons," he grunted. "Boss says you're smart for a jarhead." I kept quiet, letting them think they had the upper hand. Inside, the warehouse was mostly empty, just a few old shipping containers and beat-up office furniture. In the center sat Emma, zip-tied to a chair. When she saw me, her eyes lit up, but she kept silent. Smart girl. Michelle stepped out of the shadows, flanked by 2 more muscle-bound lackeys. The whole scene reeked of amateurism. They were standing bunched together with their backs to the windows, no cover, no tactical spread. These weren't professionals. They were thugs who thought fear was enough. "Perfect," she said, her voice dripping with smug satisfaction. "Mr. Sullivan, so glad you could join us. The deed, please." She held out a manicured hand. I raised the folder but didn't hand it over. "First, I need to know something," I said. "How many families have you ruined with this scheme?" I needed her on record. My backup recorder was hidden in my boot. She gave that shark's smile again and said, 43 properties across 5 neighborhoods in 3 states. But Willow Creek, that's the prize. Property values have doubled since we started. Once the zoning changes go through, and believe me, they're already paid for. The city council will rubber stamp them next month. Then values will triple. It's textbook economics. Intimidate owners into selling low, hold the land, rezone, and sell high to developers. The brilliance is, HOAs can create rules, levy fines, and even foreclose. It's legal, barely regulated, and brutally efficient. She stepped closer, radiating confidence. We target the right demographics: elderly, single parents, minorities, anyone who's vulnerable or unable to afford legal pushback. Your profile? Ideal. Widowed father, military background, probably with some PTSD, no nearby family. Isolated and easy to pressure. I shifted slightly, angling my boot for better audio. "And the police? City officials?" I asked. She waved, a hand like it was beneath her. "Everyone has a price. The police chief's daughter suddenly got into an Ivy League school. The mayor's gambling debts disappeared. 3 city council members now own ski cabins in Aspen. Even that golden boy officer you've been chatting with, Rodriguez, his mother's medical bills are suddenly under review by our so-called charitable foundation." Her arrogance was staggering. But it was exactly what I needed. Soon he'll learn to look the other way too. The ease with which she spoke of corruption turned my stomach, but it also revealed her weakness. She was too confident, convinced she had everything under control. She believed she'd bought every official, manipulated every variable, and silenced every threat. That kind of arrogance always leaves cracks. "Speaking of which," she went on, "you should know your little investigation hasn't exactly gone unnoticed. Those cameras you installed? We've been watching you watch us. It's been quite the show. Military-grade paranoia, top marks for effort. I forced my shoulders to sag, let defeat settle into my posture. So, there's no way out, I muttered. No one I can trust? Her smile stretched wider. Oh, Jake, you still don't get it. This was never just about Willow Creek. We're part of a national network. We've perfected the HOA takeover model. In 10 years, we'll control residential real estate values in every major suburb across the country. Politicians will depend on us for endorsements. We'll dictate who lives where, who gets to build, who thrives, and who disappears. The American dream will run through us, and we'll take a cut of every piece of it. She leaned in close, her perfume cloyingly sweet. But you could be part of it. A man with your experience could lead our security division. 7-figure salary, bonuses, full benefits. Just sign the deed, and you're in. Think about Emma, private school, European summers, a trust fund big enough to set her up for life. The offer caught me off guard, not intimidation, but recruitment. It made a twisted kind of sense. Flip the threat, turn the enemy into an ally. But they'd misjudged me. They assumed every man had a price, that a widowed Marine raising a daughter alone could be bought. What they didn't understand was that some things, honor, integrity, the example you set for your child, aren't for sale. That's a generous offer, I said slowly, stalling. But what about the people you've already hurt? Carol's husband, Mrs. Thompson. She lost the home she'd lived in for 40 years. Michelle's face darkened. Collateral damage, she said coldly. You, of all people, should understand that. How many civilians died in your wars for the so-called greater good? This is no different. We're building something bigger than sad little stories. Let me see Emma up close, I said. Before I sign anything, I need to know she's really okay. Michelle gave a slight nod to Tony, who cut the zip ties binding Emma's wrists, but kept a heavy hand on her shoulder. Emma ran to me, and I knelt to hug her tight, whispering, "When I say butterfly, drop flat. Understand?" She nodded subtly against my shoulder. That's my girl. I stood up, Emma's small hand in mine, and faced Michelle. You know what's funny about being a Marine? I said, calm now. They teach you a lot of tricks, like how to spot a fake deed. I held up the paper. This? Worthless. But this? I tapped my boot. This is priceless. Her expression shifted from smug to puzzled to furious in an instant. You think you're clever? She snapped. Tony? The big guy stepped forward, cracking his knuckles. Marine or not, you're one man. We've got 5 guys here, all armed. So what's your play, hero? I smiled for the first time since walking into that warehouse. My play? Already made it, I said. While you were busy monologuing about your master plan, you forgot the first rule of warfare. Always secure your perimeter. Her eyes flicked toward the windows just as red laser sights danced across the chests of her men. Meet my backup. I said, you mess with a Marine. You mess with the whole Corps. 6 of my former teammates were positioned outside, each one an expert marksman and fiercely loyal to their brother-in-arms and his daughter. And those sirens growing louder? That was the state police, FBI, and federal marshals, all keyed in on her interstate racketeering scheme. Michelle went pale. Her hand moved toward her jacket. Don't, I warned. My snipers had you locked since you started your little villain monologue, which, by the way, made for a great recording. Very thorough. Butterfly, I said. Emma hit the floor. Instantly, and chaos erupted. Tony lunged at me, but barely managed 2 steps before a flashbang cracked through the window. Dazed and off balance, he was easy to flip with a judo throw, slamming him into a support beam. The rest of the goons fared no better. Between the breach team pouring in from every entry and my squad providing overwatch, it was over in under 30 seconds. Michelle tried to run but tripped over Emma's outstretched foot. My daughter looked up at me with a mischievous grin. Oops, I laughed. That's my girl. Sweet trip. As agents zip-tied wrists and secured the scene, Michelle glared up at me from the floor. You ruined everything, she hissed. Do you even know how much money you just cost us? I knelt beside her so she could see the truth in my eyes. You want to talk about cost? You made my daughter afraid in her own home. You terrorized good people. You bought off cops and officials, and for what? Profit? You traded humanity for a bottom line. The warehouse filled with agents and floodlights as Linda Xiao's files began to blow open everything. Offshore accounts, shell corporations, dark money funneled through PACs and campaign funds. She'd documented it all. The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit moved fast. And then came the real break. Tony loaded into a patrol car and, staring down a lifetime of charges, folded like damp paper. I'll tell you everything, he said. Michelle? She's just mid-level. There's a whole board. They call themselves the Homeowners Liberation Front. He laughed bitterly. Stupid name, right? But they've got setups in 12 states. His confession exposed a web of corruption that stretched far beyond our town. Over 200 HOAs infiltrated, thousands of homeowners bullied, forced out, or manipulated. They'd built an empire on fear and red tape, with specialists in law, finance, and psychological operations all working together. Rodriguez, who despite their efforts never broke, led the final sweep. When you first came to me, he said as we watched Michelle being hauled off, I thought maybe you were just another vet with a persecution complex. But you were right. They were everywhere. Permits, zoning, even the damn newspaper editor, bought and paid for. He looked toward Emma, who was now giving her statement to a kind-faced FBI agent, recounting names, dates, license plates, details I hadn't even noticed. She's something else, he said. You know that, right? Yeah, I said, watching her animatedly show how she'd escaped the zip ties, apparently using a knot I taught her during a camping trip. She's got what matters most. She knows right from wrong, and she's not afraid to act on it. The aftermath was worse than we expected. It wasn't just about evictions and bribes. Michelle's crew had left a trail of shattered lives. At least 3 suicides traced back to their schemes. 6 months later, Willow Creek Estates was unrecognizable in the best possible way. Gone were the menacing HOA notices taped to doors like eviction warnings. Gone were the secret meetings, the quiet evictions, the nervous glances between neighbors. In their place were block parties, cookouts, and community gardens. Kids biked in packs again. Dogs barked freely. Porch lights came on not in suspicion, but in welcome. The new HOA board was made up entirely of residents elected transparently and fairly. Their first act? Slash unnecessary rules, eliminate arbitrary fines, and rewrite the bylaws with input from the entire neighborhood. Carol Bennett, now president of the board, ran the meetings like open town halls. She wore jeans and sneakers, not suits, and began each session with a simple promise. We serve the people who live here, not the ones who want to buy us out. Mrs. Thompson's tapes helped exonerate wrongfully evicted families, some of whom returned to rebuild their homes and their lives. George Kim's meticulous records became the basis for class action lawsuits that now threatened to financially dismantle the Homeowners Liberation Front. Even the mailman, Ed, became a local hero. They gave him a key to the community center. Rodriguez, now head of the Special Task Force for Housing-Related Corruption, still checked in regularly. His mother's medical bills were now fully covered legally by a coalition of grateful residents and veteran groups. He even stopped by for barbecue Sundays and brought his niece to play with Emma. And Emma? She was thriving. Her story had made national news, though we kept most of the details quiet to protect her. Still, she'd been awarded a special commendation from the governor, and a scholarship fund had been started in her name for children of veterans facing housing discrimination. One day she asked me, "Daddy, does this mean we're safe now?" I looked around at the laughter spilling out of yards, the way neighbors waved from porches instead of pulling curtains closed. "I think we are, Sunshine," I said. "But more importantly, we're ready, because we'd learned the hard truth. Corruption grows in silence. But when a community stands together, loud, honest, unafraid, it doesn't just survive. It becomes unbreakable And no one, not even a national criminal syndicate hiding behind HOA bylaws, could take that from us again.